if we restore the alpha, let's see if this one had it. Yep. Okay, so this image here that we stored also stored the alpha channel at the time when we had already selected the background to be transparent and then inverted it, so we now have the selected terrain. And what we can do is we can pick this up into a custom brush, right? Quite often you want to think through the brush. Pick this up as a custom brush. You can go here and say use selected, so the entire image is picked up, including the alpha channel, if there is one. If you have a selection in place, it will pick that into the brush as well. So let's use the selected as brush. That's one way to do it. And at that point, it's in the custom brush. You can actually see it up here. This image is now in the custom brush, and you can go and store that. Highly recommended, so you can see what you're actually dealing with. And you notice that there is in the thumb wheel here, in the thumbnail, there is a bit of transparency plaid pattern showing at the top and at the bottom. It's not the same aspect ratio, but we don't really need it to understand what we're dealing with. Here it is again, by the way. It's potentially an animated brush, but this one has only one image, so it's not. But it is a custom brush, and we can paint with that. We can also just stamp it on top of something else. You can also save it directly from the brush menu. You can save it as a you could save it as a JPEG, but you would lose the alpha channel there, right? JPEG does only have RGB. So if you want to keep that transparency mask, you need to save it as something that keeps the alpha channel, such as the default Targa. That would be our native preferred mode, default Targa. And there is other options like PNG is a common format. I think it's open source, I'm not really sure, but it's used just about everywhere. So when you save it to PNG, we save it internally to Targa and then convert it to PNG and keep that 32-bit with the alpha channel. Same with many other formats like TIFF. Try and experiment, and whenever you save, make sure it's saved the way you wanted it. Test it, right? Find if you can load it back with the alpha channel. And all right, so one thing we'll do is we'll use this current brush. If you switch to other brushes, you can switch back to this one simply by clicking on the thumbnail. So now that's your current brush. You can see it right here. It's a little bit small because the size is small here. I'm going to make it 100%. It's a little bit transparent because the opacity currently is not full. So I'm going to go 100, or 255 is the binary value. You notice there's also a bottom little marker trail. There was a selection. I don't know if that's a bug, but there was a little bit of a selection, a couple of pixels at the very bottom. And sometimes because of that, instead of using just the option here, use selected as brush, you may want to, first of all, if you see some marching ants down there, which we definitely did, I didn't mention it, but now that you also see it, I'm going to go back in time, undo this, and you can see right there. Hold on, let me turn the preview of the brush off here. You can see that there is some marching ants here. Sometimes it's just an artifact. If you do a refresh and it's still there, then that means it's in the image, in the alpha channel. And so what you want to do is get rid of that before you pick it up, right? How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. You can use the select rectangle select, and with the right button, remove that. Oops, nope, that's not it. So undo. With the left button, remove that. But no, that's not it either. What you need to do is use the right button with the shift, because you're adding or removing from the current. See, if left button here will add, right button will remove, but only if I have the shift key down, right? So it's with the shift key, you get to modify the current selection mask without losing it all. So here, if I want to remove some of these marching ants, I'll use the shift key and then start dragging here with the right button. And there's a few more, and eventually you might have them all, right? Or at least close enough that you won't mind if something like that is still there. But there shouldn't be any marching ants showing in this area. All right, so that's one way to fix the alpha, the selection mask, so that you are now ready to just pick it up like this. Use the selected as brush. All right, now there is another way, and that's the one I prefer usually, and that's to actually explicitly say what part of the image you really want to pick up. Because you may not want to waste all, see this upper area, there's so much of that, you may not want to load that into the brush. Because when you actually stamp the brush, you're going to place it somewhere. There's a lot of memory wasted if you pick all this into the into the custom brush. So there is a custom brush pickup tool, and that's this one here, the custom brush pickup tool, just below the magic wand and before the color picker, turkey baster. You have the custom brush selector tool. Click that, and now you get to use the marquee to select what part you actually want. And if you wanted everything from the left to the right, but not everything top and bottom, you could go on the outside of the image. Right, make sure it's comfortable to select here. Zoom in. You can do that with some of these tools. Move this around, zoom in, and so on. But you can also use the thumb wheel on your mouse if you have one. Anyway, you can select just this part, and now you've picked that up as a custom brush, and then store it. And you notice now that we have a better use of the selection. Actually, not so much. This one here was not picking the entire image. This one was the one where we had the automatic selection, right? Remember this one? So when we do that, it looks for the bounding box around the current selection, which got pretty much the same thing, right? But if you were to pick the entire image, let's say for instance this way here, if you pick this entire image, then you know you have a fairly big part here that's still transparent and kind of wasting memory. Sometimes you need it that way though, because you want to keep the same dimensions as the original image. And if you do, then that's one of the ways to do it. All right, so what do we do once you have it in the image? Well, you load another image, not through the selection here, but let's go clear the selection, then load the image, then pick the brush. Let's say we want, I don't know which one, this one maybe, and enable the brush. Make sure you use the brush tool, right? And make sure you have the brush visibility. So now you can, oh, that was the wrong one. Let's go with this one. Okay, I'm going to delete this one. All right, so we have this one, and you can now just simply stamp it down where you want, right? You can even make it a little bit bigger so you have some margin to play with, and perhaps have it something like this, right? So, oh, and I still have some random positioning, so it doesn't actually stamp it down exactly where I was. That's not nice. Let's go and do random position off. There you go. So now it's a little bit more predictable, right? And that's probably all we need. All right, so undo this, and let's say I wanted it here. So now I have the image here. All right. Now you notice sometimes that there is a little bit of a green edge because we picked it up from a green screen. The transparency was done with the green screen, and it had anti-aliasing there. So it has some green values that just didn't make the cut. And stuff like that you can adjust. That's a separate topic, but there's a brush pre-multiply correction that can help sometimes. And then in other times, you need to just reduce the transparency mask a little bit. So you could take the brush and then tighten that. There are some tools with the transparency here to grow or shrink the key. Let's say we do a shrink of the key, and there you go. It's less. I think it has less of the green. We might want to do it one more time. Brush, transparency, shrink. Yeah, now the green edge is pretty much gone. Yep. Now that means you potentially lose half a pixel or something of the mountain scene, but that's a small price to pay. And so now you can also actually use this image. Let's go store this one. Brush and store. And at this time, I'm gonna perhaps want to have it a little bit different in coloration, perhaps a little bit brighter and a slightly different hue. Perhaps a little bit more saturated and a little bit brighter. All right, so now you have, and also I want it to look different. So I'm gonna switch. If I do the X4 horizontal flip, well, let me put it down there. You can have it in a different orientation, so it looks really different. But this one also gives you the lighting different, right? The background image, the sun seems to be coming from the left, or the star seems to be coming from the left, and this one here seems to be coming from the right. So be aware that that's not always going to be the right solution to flip it horizontally. You can use X for horizontal flip. You can use Y for vertical flip. And either way, when you make some significant changes to that brush, you might want to save it too. And that's basically it when it comes to compositing things. Oh, there's one more. Let's do one more. All right, so let's go get rid of these brushes. There is one more technique, and that is, again, if we have one image that has the background, I'm going to go actually put it into the